unfortunately, majority of the times there's been a celebrity involved in a project, it seems to flop. Like it's almost like a check mark of like, don't go near this if it had a major celebrity pushing it.
Welcome to Visionaries, a twice-weekly podcast from Overcome, where we interview some of the most successful and powerful people in gaming and internet culture. I'm Jacob Wolf, your host and an award-winning investigative journalist. Today we're welcoming on Mike Darlington, the co-founder and CEO of Monstercat. In 2011, Darlington and his partner founded the Canadian record label while in college. It quickly found its home as a part of the YouTube revolution when the video sharing website began to grow significantly in popularity. And over the past 11 years, through partnerships with the likes of video games Rocket League and Beat Saber, as well as a flat-rate subscription program allowing for creators to use their music in their videos, Monstercat's found a lot of success. So we wanted to invite Mike on to talk about that and how gaming's been a part of Monstercat's success story. Mike Darlington, welcome to Visionaries. Now, I think when most people think gaming music, it's really on the internet, especially on YouTube, there are really two companies that to me that really stand out, and it's you all, Monstercat, and the other being No Copyright Sounds, who have done a lot of really good work for people in that space as well. So yeah, let's start there, Mike. What's the founding story of Monstercat?
It ties into this pretty perfectly into the gaming space. So when I first was kind of coming up in this world, I was working in social media and throwing events. So through the event space, I got to understand, what went into being an artist, the bookings, just like a little bits and pieces here and there from the people we'd book. And through those parties, I got introduced to some great musicians, got to know those musicians pretty well, and actually started playing video games with those guys almost every day, whether it was Dota, Minecraft, Call of Duty. I'm trying to think what was around back then. Those were kind of like the homies. We'd get together and play video games, and I would hear a lot of the, their frustrations and complaints about, being a musician. And me, not as a music guy, but as like a marketing guy. I was like, okay, cool. I think we can solve this. I think we can help, or I can help. And that was kind of the impetus of Monstercat. It's just bunch of musicians who played video games wanted to get their content out there and needing help.
You guys came at a very special time to sort of YouTube as a whole, and we've talked to a couple different people on the show that existed it back then too, and I think we're going to have a few on in the next couple of weeks who I've been walking down the book who are at this very, it's not the birth of YouTube, but it feels like it. It is really sort of the popularization of YouTube as a means to consume media. And you all were certainly one of the music arms of that, as far as I recall, back in the early 2010s, late aughts. How would you describe what YouTube culture was back then and where y'all's seat was in it?
Yeah, good question. Well, YouTube was definitely the driving force of organic engagement, organic growth as an influencer or as a, somebody developing as a content creator. It was really raw back then, though. I think the concept of the algorithm and, different means to grow were really kind of up in the air. Everyone was trying new things. Video gaming was just starting to pop off as something you could even have on YouTube. If you guys remember, like early YouTube, you couldn't just like upload video game content. It was only specific YouTube MCNs and very specific games that people could even play and monetize. So it was fun. It was like everybody was just trying new things, and these mass MCNs were forming and recruiting and bringing people in. But for us, we saw like a real opportunity in the sense that as YouTube was growing, especially in the gaming side, we just so often heard the need for music and the need for music for the content. And without having that music for the content, it kind of left the videos feeling a bit flat. So Content ID was pretty early on YouTube. I can't remember the year it kind of launched, but that was like a very pivotal moment where people were like, okay, this has gone from, a slap on the wrist of you should use music that you have the proper rights to it being like there was actually like a penalty to not respecting, music copyrights. So as I said, it was kind of a Wild West. Everyone was trying new things, and and we just were like on that ride and hoping that we could solve problems for content creators and our artists at the same time.
It's hard for me to remember exactly what the success point was for you all, because it felt like it was not necessarily it was super quick, but I do remember I was listening to Monstercat music before you guys really started doing the compilation, so it dates back that far. And obviously the compilations in themselves have been hyper successful. You guys release those tunes throughout the whatever the quarter or whatever it may be, and then put them out together as a bundled package. What was that success point? What really made Monstercat take off in the way that it has?
I'd say that the packaged concept around a brand that brought artists together, that kind of shared common goals, that were all up and coming. I think our licensing strategy absolutely played into our growth. We worked at one point with majority of the top content creators, top esports teams, top organizations. And I'm going to lean back into gaming a lot, not just because of like this is your world, but because it's truthfully was what broke the label in a great way. So I don't think there was any like one moment in that earliest stages, but I have to give a lot of credit to the content creators, the YouTube channels that used to like post and promote music. I got to give a lot of credit to them. They really helped us grow. And then we had a couple hits along the way. We had some micro hits from artists like Pegboard Nerds and Tristram, and then we had, of course, a mega hit from Marshmello. I think those are a couple moments that really just propelled us forward year over year with small, healthy growth. We never really had that hockey stick, like the 10,000% in a year type growth. And I think that sustainability meant that we were able to reinvest year over year and create a model for our artists that has actually worked now for 11 years. It was never like that one thing that's kind of set it off.
How would you find these artists? What was your recruitment method back then?
It was a mixture. I committed early on to that we would like listen to all demos that came into the demo box, which was a massive undertaking. I didn't really realize what that meant at the time. We had a lot of good friends that would recommend musicians, and artists on the roster actually brought forward a lot of the people we signed. And then last of all, we had for a short period of time a community platform where community members could vote on demos. Yeah, which was a cool concept. I don't think it would work in the modern era, but at the time it was fun. So yeah, that's kind of how we found like most of the early roster.
As far as I remember, you all were doing individual licensing before you started Monstercat Gold. Is that right? You guys were doing licensing bundles before that?
Yeah, we were doing very like direct licenses. So we would work with a specific creator, say Captain Sparkles at the time. We would provide him a catalog of music. We'd even try to connect him with some of the artists we were working with, and he would pick songs for his content. And then eventually we realized that we could do that, but we could also open up our ecosystem to the general creator community through a subscription model called Monstercat Gold, where people could pay at that time $5 a month and get access to our catalog to be able to use in your YouTube and Twitch content. Now, I do want to drive home the point, though, that was purely it allowed you to monetize the content. We've always been completely open to people using our music in their videos, as long as they recognize that they would see a content claim on the video itself. So we were never aggressive about like takedowns and DMCAs. It was always meant to be everybody can use the music. If you want to compensate the artist, you can either do it via the content claim, or you can subscribe to the Monstercat Gold, which is that subscription platform we did. So it was a bit of personal licensing one-to-one, and then our paid subscription model that came after it.
And how did the economics of that shake out? How were you guys being able to do that while giving kickbacks to artists, etc.?
Well, I think in the examples of like a YouTube channel that maybe had millions of subscribers, the content ID revenue would have been higher than the $5 a month we were making from that channel. However, the way we looked at it is that they probably weren't going to continue using the music if they were receiving content claims. So we were pretty happy with $5 a month, and that $5 a month we would break down and based upon the rev shares we have with the artists, they would receive their split of that $5 a month. And also depending on the usage of the music within our ecosystem. If a channel was coming in and exclusively using one artist, then they would receive that share kind of of the split. So It was an equitable way to make sure our artists got paid, but also I think we did it in a way that hopefully was seen as fair for the content creator community as well.
One thing I want to ask about, because you mentioned in an earlier answer, is MCNs. It's something
Yeah.
that came up on this show a few weeks ago, talking to another creator. Can you walk through sort of the people unfamiliar with what the MCN culture, or what MCN stands for, and what it was back then in the early stages of YouTube?
Yeah, I can speak to the early stages. I don't know what it is today, but in the early stages, an MCN basically would find channels that had potential success, would offer them revenue share deals to provide the ability for that channel to put advertisements on their content, or they would offer like paid high end custom ads on their content, and they would do rev shares on that content. So at that time, it was kind of once this technology kind of came out through YouTube that they could roll up channels into an MCN, it was kind of a race, a rat race of everyone trying to like recruit all the best channels and offer the best deals, and one person would undercut another person. But the one consistent there was, while they were all fighting for the channels, we knew they all needed music. So they kind of had their games and their fights, and we would just sit there in the back, being like, "You guys need music? We got you." So yeah, it evolved pretty rapidly from when that MCN model first kind of arose to eventually, I think any channel now can monetize their content on YouTube after a certain point, which is definitely a more equitable way of doing it.
Were you all ever an MCN yourself?
We were at one point like I don't even know, like a sub network, I guess you could say. Like we were part of an MCN, and then we would like roll up channels that are music channels specifically within the MCN. And then that concept, we ended up spinning out into its own company, which ended up becoming the EDM District. So that company was an MCN and managed advertisements and channels. And I sold that many years ago at this point. So I haven't been in the MCN game for a long time.
It's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Right?
EDM District. Yeah.
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 I think they're still cruising though. They still got their channels. They're still, building them. They're still creating campaigns. Like they're around.
Yeah. I think the websites are probably more traffic than the YouTube MCN at this point, but or at least they were at one point. Okay. So let's talk about sort of gaming as a whole, because you all were sort of parallel to it in so many different ways and a part of its growth. Why do you think gaming has been such a successful vertical of content on YouTube?
It's a good category on YouTube and Twitch and all these platforms, just because there's such a way to experience a game and see it through the eyes of a creator and enjoy their personality, that I don't know. I found that it just clicked really well in the gaming space. It's a massive industry, of course. There's millions and millions of people that play video games. So I don't know. There's kind of a secret sauce to like entertainment and watching people play games, especially people who are really good at the game, that just seemed to work really well. And in the early days of YouTube, I'm not sure. It just worked, and they figured out how to monetize it really quickly and how to work with the different publishers and developers really early on. That just felt organic. So I don't know. It just made sense to me, and I'm sure that a lot of the reasons why gaming worked on YouTube 11 years ago is probably the reason it still works on YouTube and Twitch today.
Yeah, it's that interactive content, etc. What did you guys dabble in any of that in terms of, I think most people remember Monstercat waveform videos with maybe album art, maybe not, and various different colors. Like that's the sort of traditional Monstercat video. Did you guys dabble in doing more interactive media in any type of way on YouTube?
We definitely tried different things, different pieces of content. I think the reality was video content is just so expensive, and the music industry is an industry of fractions of pennies. And I don't think we ever figured out to this day how to create really high engaging content that made sense from the economic standpoint. Even to this point, I still don't think we have the answer to it. I think we're making better strides with like short form content and clippable content, but yeah, the long form YouTube content is really challenging. And I applaud people who've been able to build brands and channels around that original content. It's really challenging.
Why do you think dance music in particular has the connection to gaming that it does and the way that it does?
Well, there's so many sounds that you find in dance music that originated from the gaming industry, from old synths. There's just something in the back of your brain that has that nostalgia factor of sound design that you find in the dance music industry. I think also from like a content creator standpoint, it really made its way through the ecosystem because of the fact that the licensing frameworks are much simpler in dance music than they are in other forms of other genres, like where there's a lot more writers and publishers and creators involved in a song. Dance music, often you have, one person who produced it. They maybe worked with a vocalist who often is also the writer. So it just made it easier to license and make available in the YouTube space and the Twitch space. But yeah, no, it's one of those magic things that just kind of seem to work together is gaming electronic music. There's that meme about they go so hand in hand. Like I can't really picture, especially like the Minecraft era. I can't picture the content without hearing like electronic music jingles in the background of the content. It just worked so well.
Yeah, I think, especially as it pertains to like FPS games, etc. too, something about the BPM and like the excitedness of a lot of different dance music, right? Like the best Call of Duty montages are set to drum and bass, right? Like it's almost this like, really kind of fun. They match each other in their pace and their tempo. So
racing games as well. All the best racing games have like drum and bass that are in the radio systems.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to go back to a little bit more about you guys and the success that you all found. I know that you made kind of the broad stroke that Marshmallow was like this huge inflection point. You guys were growing pretty significantly before then, and were on felt like a pretty steep incline, very separated from a lot of the dance music industry, as I remember. What was the first thing that you remember that was like, oh wow, our concept is legitimate?
Yeah, I've had this question come up over the years, and the answers always stayed the same. There was a moment where artists started like writing me on Facebook chat back then, being like, "Just so you know, thank you, one, but two, I'm taking this music thing really seriously. I just like quit my job," and that was kind of like that moment where I'm like, "Oh shit, this is no longer like just us messing around on the internet. Like people are putting their livelihood in our hands." Gotta take this serious. So that was definitely that moment, at least that I realized that there was something pretty magical that happened. From a business standpoint, though, there was just so many of these little like check boxes over the years. I don't think, again, I don't have one that really was like everything has changed because of this.
Do you remember songs that were particularly impactful to that, and the brand and the publicity around what you all were doing that really took off?
Oh yeah. There was definitely like early tracks from Pegboard Nerds and early tracks from Tristram and Breakin' that like really exploded early on. We're talking like tens of millions of plays in the YouTube community, and they still to this day I like end up on a video. I'm like, wow, there's this video is using a song from 2013. Like that's pretty amazing. So yeah, those were kind of some of the artists I want to give a lot of credit to. I'd say that they were like the big artists of Monstercat for a very long time.
Taking a quick break from this episode to have a word from our sponsors. The journey of my career has been pretty fast-paced. I started writing at 17, and within 16 months, I went from having never written a published article to landing a job at ESPN as their youngest talent hire ever. With that fast-paced career, I've often found myself struggling with imposter syndrome and with work-related anxiety. But over the past few years, seeing a therapist really helped me guide my way. And if you think you may be feeling depressed, stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed, then today's sponsor, BetterHelp, is here to help you. BetterHelp offers licensed therapists who are trained to listen and help you. Talk to your therapist in a private online environment whenever's convenient for you. And if you're like me, where it seems there's never enough time in the day, you understand how important that convenience is. There's a broad range of expertise in BetterHelp's 20,000 plus therapist network that gives you access to help that may not be available in your area. Finding a therapist can be hard, but BetterHelp simplifies that experience. You start by filling out a questionnaire to assess your specific needs, and within 48 hours, BetterHelp will match you with a therapist. From there, it's easy. Schedule video and phone sessions, message your therapist as much as you want. whenever you need to, and everything you share is completely confidential. You can request a new therapist at no additional charge anytime. I've been seeing my therapist Diane for 4 years now, and when we reflect back on the progress I've made in my life for the better, it's a pleasant reminder of why I started seeking help and the goals I had when we first started working together. Join the 3 million plus people who've taken charge of their mental health with an experienced BetterHelp therapist. Get your 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/visionaries. That's betterhelp.com/visionaries.
Yeah, I still stumble into flight sometimes.
Right?
As well too.
Flight.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the creator economics for a musician, because it is still something we haven't figured out. A lot of people campaigning, I think a lot of people were very resistant to Spotify and music streaming when it first came out, because I think rightfully so, they understood what the value proposition was going to be for musicians. It doesn't pay well, but it is the only way most people consume music. Nobody's buying off of iTunes anymore in the way that they used to. And the other part of that too is that we've seen musicians try to find other avenues of revenue, whether it be, streaming themselves on TikTok or Twitch and trying to figure out how to monetize that, to doing things completely unrelated to music, but being able to kind of use their music audience and music press to drive engagement to that. And that's something we've talked about in this show, is finding those alternative avenues. So let's start at the very beginning of that. You all did start off before streaming's popularity. What did economics look like then? What was the trickle down from the buy to you guys to the artist? And then how did that change with streaming becoming a part of the economy?
Well, maybe because I'm not much of like a maths guy, we kind of stuck to a model from day one that we still to this day still use. It's still a 50-50 net license. So if a dollar comes in, whatever costs are taken off the top, and the artists are paid their share. Actually, in a lot of ways, we share the costs between, like the Monstercat will take on some of the costs, artists will take on some of the costs. So that kind of concept of an equitable relationship with the artists has really been the consistent model from day one. So whether it was a compilation where if there are 10 artists on an album and there are 10 songs, you divide the $10 or whatever the amount after the fee off the store. You divide that out by the artists on it, and then they got their 50%, and Monstercat got our 50%. So that concept, whether it was an album or a single or a compilation, or even now with like the streaming revenue, it just works its way that anytime we make money as a label, the artist makes money. Now, definitely don't get me wrong, it's more challenging now, I'd say. Putting millions of impressions on content to generate, thousands of dollars is in my opinion harder than selling 2,000 singles, or whatever the math works out to being. The game has changed, but at the end of the day, a record label really only has the responsibility of marketing your artists and getting them paid. If you don't do one of those two things, you're not a record label. Some are better than others, but that's what it comes down to.
What is the value of an impression? As much as you're like able to think through and like know off the top of your head, an impression on Spotify versus an impression on YouTube, what does that look like?
We deal in the thousands of impressions, and then the thousands of impressions work its way to being a couple bucks type of thing, plus or minus an extra couple bucks in each direction. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but know that it is a tough game out there for musicians. They're really pushed into the live and apparel and new economic models because it's so difficult to make it as just a stay-at-home producer. And I think it's only gotten more challenging over the years. I think right now, actually, the music industry is the hardest I've seen it's ever been to be a musician.
Why do you say that?
Well, there's so many things that kind of all went the wrong direction all at once. COVID hit, you lost all your shows. COVID hit, a lot of the sync revenue and deals fell through. Now that the shows have reopened, you get sick on the road, you end up losing half the tour, or your TM gets sick, or your stage production team or whatever gets. It's just that fell through. Flight prices are now so expensive. Most music platforms have moved to very like algorithmic discovery, which is more challenging. Same with socials, guys. I'm sure you've seen how difficult it is to grow on Twitter and Instagram now. I just can't think of one thing where I could say it's easier to be a musician now than it was 10 years ago. I think it's truly harder in every way.
And so the one thing I want to ask about that is how does that impact the way that you're doing marketing?
It means that you got to really think outside the box and create new forms of distribution, new ways for the content to be discovered. You can't use the same techniques because it's getting more expensive to use those old techniques. And it's just not working as well as it once did. So it's a constant game of like, how can we be better? How can we get our artists out there in new ways? How can we do custom campaigns? And how do we look at new technology and new industries as they start to develop? And how do we look at new, ways that people listen to music now and find a way to place ourselves? So yeah, it's a rat race of evolution. And the labels and the artists that don't evolve with the times, they don't exist anymore.
Social media certainly changed the way the music promotion works. And you all were, to me, one of the first people to try to figure it out. Maybe not always correctly, but definitely, smash hit sometimes. It felt like you guys sort of hit it out of the park. Was that native to your team? Like, did you all have a good understanding of social media, having grown up with it in some instances, or was it something that you kind of figured out with time?
Definitely with time. None of us studied it. I did work as a social media manager, digital marketing type guy early on in my career. But the people who are really great at building communities are ones that lived and breathed being communities, like on the internet. If you're from the internet and you were raised by the internet to some regard, it kind of clicks for you. And that's why you're prepared for this change and evolution, because you're so used to that change and evolution. Like Jacob, you've seen the come and go of everything. And I'm sure this is why like these things, you're able to evolve with the times. And I'm not asking you, are you doing the same thing you were doing, 8 years ago? So it's, I think that what's challenging now is that as my time and my senior leadership's time has changed and we have to focus on different areas, it's actually pulled us further and further away from being a part of that like ground level community building that not only just in the company, but with our own time in our own places, that there are going to be the next generation of people come up within crazy community development ways, crazy social digital marketing ways that I hope I can recruit those people onto our team so that they can bring it in-house. But it's definitely a challenge to, not become a boomer, really understand how this is all evolving.
And how do you use that to parlay into building sustainable business? I saw somebody in the space earlier. I don't think he's here anymore, but Cody Allard, who used to be my boss once upon a time, now works for you. Cody's a great person. But how, now you have a team, you have responsibilities that they have to pay their bills and you got to make sure you pay yours and get including their payroll. How did you build that into a sustainable business, given all the economic issues you've described, and making sure that it's not just one hit wonder marketing here, one hit wonder marketing there, but consistency from the artist, from the label, etc.?
Well, I think it comes down to the model. Like statistics are interesting. They're a lot more like, I guess that's the beauty of statistics. They're, for people who really understand it, they're quite predictable. You can map things out, especially with streaming revenue in the music industry. You kind of can see the direction things are moving in, and you can make small adjustments to kind of continue that growth or to avoid catastrophe. So I think small changes and decision making and just monitoring really well, having a great finance team that really kept us abreast to any changes going on, has just allowed us to make decisions that were sustainable, where we considered our team. We're 72, I think, maybe even more than that now. I saw a couple of emails go out of new staff members, people, and we've grown 10 to 20 staff year over year in the last set of years. And it was all done through budgeting, through planning, and through really looking at the numbers. So it is possible to run a sustainable business that, grows over time in music. It's possible. I think the mistake you can make, though, is you get caught up in this hype of a hit or a trend. And if you don't plan for that trend and that hit to kind of dissipate over time, then that's where you find yourself in trouble. So you really got to plot it out and make the right decisions.
For those of you all listening on the space, we are going to be taking some audience questions at the end. If you want to use hashtag Visionaries podcast to be able to ask questions for Mike, my team will reach out and then can promote you up to be a speaker towards the end. We'll call that out. Okay, so the next part of that I want to talk about is the managing the personalities. One thing that gaming and music have in common, in my opinion, is that like they both have a lot of creative people in them, all art too. And gaming content in itself is pretty much art. And the one thing I've noticed, having done work in both, is that there are really big personalities, and not necessarily their interest in what they're most passionate about aligns with the most economic or business sense. Maybe they want to do something that doesn't make sense from a business perspective. How have you managed that and sort of guided these like very young, passionate, creative people into building those sustainable careers for themselves, which ultimately, impacts what you're doing too?
Yeah. So fortunately, our business model means that we do limited term licenses, and we don't do like multi-year, multi-album deals. So artists have a lot of flexibility with Monstercat. They can work with us for a couple of years or a couple tracks, and then decide it's not the right fit. And the same goes for Monstercat. We can work with an artist to be like, yeah, it's not working. The beauty of that, though, is it means that artists have all the room in the world to be creative, all the room in the world to work with the music they want to work with and the marketing campaigns they want to work with. Now, we don't always agree, and sometimes we come together, we communicate, and we find a middle ground, and sometimes we don't, and that's when we part ways. The key, at least for us, is just being very clear and transparent about like what we're willing to do and not willing to do, and holding to our guns and to our belief structure. So I think it's led to some roster evolution over the years for sure, but I think overall it's allowed artists to be creative and do what they want to do.
And how do you compete for talent with the massive labels, right? And Interscope, Atlantic, etc. These people who, they're not taking risk on kind of the smaller people that you all did early on, but certainly kind of the big hitters that you guys have had release. How are you competing with those people?
Well, keep in mind that a lot of our like more known genres we work in are not signed by the major labels at all. They don't really mess with bass music or electro or some of the more like internet loving genres, drum and bass, even to the extent there's only a couple labels that work with it. But we found a lot of opportunity, especially in the gaming industry, through licensing into games and to major publishers and whatnot, because we are able to move a lot faster than some of the competitors. We have the rights frameworks already in place to be able to work with these different games. So I think that's been a major like opportunity point as being an indie. I also think our model around YouTube and Twitch can only work because we're an indie. I don't think it could work in a major ecosystem. So we're just a different option for a different type of artists, and we've had provable success in developing and breaking talent. So there's a time and place. I don't see the majors as like these terrible competitors to us that I lose sleep over. Both of us can coexist at the exact same time, no problem.
In terms of the artists being able to give back to you, because there have been artists that have stuck so much of their career with you all. I think of, when I say that, I think of Pegboard Nerds. I think of Tristram, Once Upon a Time. Obviously, I think he's on his own now, if I remember correctly.
He's fully independent at this point, as far as I know.
That's what I thought. Yeah. I think of Muzz, and I think some of these other people who have been there, not since the very beginning, but close to it.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And now they're like, either they still release with you all, or they promote, share other Monstercat artists, etc., things that they like. How those relationships, what has been the most beneficial thing for you all, other than obviously building true human relationships? What has been the most beneficial thing for you all building those relationships and that loyalty both ways?
I think it kind of that relationship, that communication caused both sides to evolve over time. I think it's pushed the artists to develop and grow their careers in ways where they've taken it more seriously and they've become more of a professional. And for us, for Monstercat, I think it reminds us of a lot of humility. It reminds us that there are people behind the computer screen, even if you don't get to spend time with everybody in person. Like that's a real human that you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. It's good to be reminded of that, and I think the people you've worked with for 11 years can very much remind you of that. We've been through a lot together. So it's definitely it's times where it's challenging because you want to see the people who've been around for the longest. You want to see them, win the most. But it's a tough game. Music is not easy. Sometimes people have something that just works and they take off. But we have a lot of love for the artists that we've worked with over the years, especially from the early days. And I know that the team does consider that in like any of the signing processes. Like, are they OG? If they're OG, if they're community members, like how do we find a way to keep them involved?
I want to talk a little bit more about Gold. We touched on it earlier and what it is. I couldn't find exactly when it launched. I do remember that it was pretty early on, but there wasn't a press release for me to peg it to the easy date. Do you remember when Gold launched specifically?
Oh man, I don't remember like the year.
I think it has to be like 2013, 2014 is when one of those, if I'm right. It's pretty early.
It went through so many eras of iteration because I don't even remember if it was first launched as, because I remember we had like a community platform and then I feel like it got merged with the licensing platform. That's probably why my memory is so blurry on how it went down. So unfortunately, no, I don't remember. Maybe one of my team members can remind me in chat like when Gold launched.
Yeah, I'm curious because I think it was. Just trying to remember what I was doing when it was around. I think it definitely came out in that era though of like 2013, 2014. So the reason I would talk about it is because there are definitely competing services to it now. Mm-hmm. We use at Overcome, we use Epidemic Sound for a lot of different things because they're, they have a little bit of and this will lead into another question later. They have like a really wide amount of music, from a bunch of different genres. I'm working on a video trailer right now that uses kind of like more creepy vocal music that comes off Epidemic. And so were there others that you were looking at back then when you launched Gold that were doing the similar thing, or did you kind of feel like you were pioneering this kind of subscription software license?
Oh, we were definitely pioneering, but even to this day, I think the area we pioneered was that these were all like named artists that were on Spotify and Apple Music and iTunes and Amazon. Like they weren't, in a lot of cases, there's like, I don't even know if they're real artists that are behind some of the songs on these licensing platforms. Like they're almost like these profiles that have been created because I can't find the artist behind the music anywhere. And I look for them. I'm curious. I want to, especially there's some great songs. I want to find out who made it. So we definitely have kept to like, we want our offering to be, artists that you can find on Twitter. You love the song, go follow the guy on Twitter, shoot them a message. Like build a relationship with the artist. Like that was kind of the area that we kind of kept to. But no, at that time, I think some of these platforms might have been bubbling up, but in most cases it was like studio music or bedroom music. It wasn't from like touring musicians type of thing.
Got it. Yeah, in terms of the price point, it was originally $5. I believe it is now $10, if I'm correct. How have you determined that and what it should be, what is fair to you all and makes economic sense?
I think that's a challenging question because there's a difference between what I think is fair and which is great for the artists and what the market can handle type of thing. And we have to remember there's economics to any decision. But I think we're at like, for the value you get now from Gold, I think we're at what, $750 a month. The value might be too high for $750 a month. Like we're providing a lot of value for the music and the roster we work with at what I consider to be a very affordable price and fair price. It probably should be higher, to be honest, but I don't think the market can sustain a substantially higher price point. Nor I think right now, I think it's just a terrible time to try to charge more of the subscription. Like everybody is hurting. I think about this a lot. It's a very challenging time to be an artist, but even just to be a fan, it's a challenging time right now, or a creator. So it's probably not the time to try to raise prices on subscriptions.
In terms of tracking all the content it goes to, obviously you were talking about Content ID earlier. It does a pretty good job at identifying where certain things are used and putting it in front of the appropriate rights holder. How difficult has it been to manage that? Has it gotten easier with time and making sure that you're getting sort of the appropriate due and verifying that they're a gold subscriber or not.
Yeah, we've tried to build up the technology the best we can, like our monitoring and bot technology, but it's a constant evolving process. I don't think anybody's nailed the solution yet for music rights tracking monetization, but we all use the best tools we have available.
I want to go back to a little bit of marketing speak because I want you to talk about some of the things that you have done that are experimental, but maybe some of the things that other musicians have done. I think a lot about you all have had involvement in Fortnite, but so have many other artists, right? Travis Scott did that massive concert in Fortnite during the pandemic. Marshmello has done stuff with Fortnite over time, obviously someone you all have worked with before. What do you think about what's going on out there, and what has kind of inspired you and your team from sort of the experimental music marketing world?
Yeah, well, I think we're always dabbling. We're always looking into new ways to connect with fans and get the music out there. We've looked into everything from AR, VR, live streaming, avatars, 3D models, projection mapping, Web3, proof of attendance tokens, fan engagement tech tokens. Like, we've looked into everything at one point or another. I think that at the end of the day, you have to be open-minded to technology because, one, it comes hard and it comes really fast. Like, when it comes in, it comes like, you're like shocked how quickly something can blow up, and that you should have been prepared for it. But also, I think, we need to do this because it's just not a great ecosystem to be a musician right now. It's not a great time to monetize your work as a musician. And we want to bring in other opportunities to help with that process. And again, fortunately, our model, I can always point back to it because I'm like, every time Monstercat wins, our artist wins. So there's no like greedy record label tries to make more money. It's like greedy record label made more money and artists made more money too. So it's we're trying to find something that's equitable for the fan and for the artists with this emerging technology as it comes out. So I don't think I have like one thing I'm going to point to. Clearly, like, I've got a hexagon display photo. Clearly, I'm excited about Web3. But I still don't think we have, all the answers yet for what that's going to look like. But there are smart people trying to figure it out.
I've been a big critic of Web3, is definitely, and I think that, it seems like there's a divide. There are people that are like unabashedly criticize everything Web3 and crypto without like any sort of some have dived deep, but I think a lot of people burned by rug pulls, etc. And then there are the people that are very aggressively pro Web3 and like wanted to take over everything. There are very few people in the middle. I try to be, as a journalist, very fair and in that middle ground. There are interesting projects in Web3. There are really awful projects in Web3, and none of them may work, but at least let people try and cover it as you got to cover it. You all do have a Web3 vertical, and I have thought a lot, and I think I've even said this in speaking into different things, that music is actually one of the most interesting use cases for Web3 in general. Something I think about is the Wu-Tang album that Martin Shkreli purchased all those years ago, and it was the sole single collector's edition of a unreleased Wu-Tang Clan album. And I think about, what if that had some sort of digital protection around it and could be distributed in a way that was trackable and not able to be pirated. What do you think about kind of, other than your tweets, Web3 and music and its current use case and potential use case?
Okay, well, you've opened up the can of worms we're in now.
Sure.
How do I want to get into this? Well, I'm going to start with the Martin Shkreli thing because it's kind of interesting. So that, if people don't know, the Wu-Tang album was a one-of-one physical album that was sold. Martin Shkreli bought it. When he was in jail, a group of Web3 people came together and then purchased that album off of him, or I guess from the DOJ or whoever had the album. Then they took that album and they fractionalized it to create a community of people who had a fractional, I guess, ownership or vested interest in that album. And I thought that was all very interesting. I'm not an advocate for gating music, though. I'm going to put that out there in Web3. I know that that's a common thing. People are like, oh, it'd be great to be able to have the ownership of a song and it's mine. And but that's not really the blockchain. Blockchain, if it's on the blockchain in any way, anyone can consume it. So I'm an advocate for looking at Web3 as a different layer of engagement with a fan, more so than I look at it as a replacement means of listening to music. I don't think you can beat $10 a month for every song that ever existed. That is too good of a deal. It's the best deal that's ever existed. So I look at it as like, how do we use this technology? Which there are some really novel ways you can engage with communities that you just can't do on in the Web2 ecosystem. Whether it's token gated content, apparel, early listenership, whether it's even using free models where you can like give these proof of attendance tokens, which are kind of like a badge, to kind of identify who are the people in your community that have contributed to your success. I think there's a lot of models that can equitably create a relationship between fan and artist that doesn't take away from how music is currently consumed. And that's more what I'm looking into each day, is not how do I take away from people's ability to engage on Spotify or whatever, but how, we can better connect fan and artist, identify who those fans are, and create original content for them in a new industry that's evolving right now. I know there's a lot of words there, but hopefully it covered what you were looking for. And I'd love to hear your criticisms, by the way. I'm not looking to have a debate, but I'm curious, I think right before we got out here, we were talking about how there's bad people in Web 2. And I'm like, yeah, there's bad people in Web 3 as well.
Absolutely. I think that when you're dealing with an industry as nascent as crypto, I think the differentiation is the hard part, because it's a technology that is relatively unexplored at its peak, right? Even with all the projects we've seen over the past 3-4 years, there are certainly a lot of people who want to take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. And I think that my biggest criticism lies around the community and less the technology. The technology, blockchain in itself, could be really interesting if used in banking and other things, ways that are like every single day lives, right? Imagine being able to, instead of doing an international wire transfer with Swift codes and being able to play around, have to wait for 3 or 4 days for it to show up. Imagine that being instantaneous in the way that it is in PayPal and in the way that it is in Venmo, etc., but secured and backed. And I think that is really, really appealing. I think the community, though, is pretty awful. I don't think there's another way to describe that. Like, a lot of the community, the most vocal people in Web3 are probably the reason for most of the criticism. And I think it's totally valid in that perspective, because I think a lot of those people are really terrible people and want to, feel exclusive and in this part of this club and kind of punch down at others. And I think that's what scares me. And then also just celebrity endorsements always have a bunch of problems, but we've seen a lot of rug pulls involving some really powerful people and the misuse of influence, and that also really bothers me too.
I'm a fully advocate for and supportive of the unfortunately, majority of the times there's been a celebrity involved in a project, it seems to flop. Like, it's almost like a check mark of like, don't go near this if it had a major celebrity pushing it. So I agree with you. I did put in our chat, I know the community can't see. Actually, I'll just say it out loud. There is a list here, which I truly back 90+% of the people listed on this list as good people that are innovators, that mean well, that aren't looking to rug pull you. This list, I think, is one of the best ones if you're looking for people to follow. It's the NFT Now NFT 100 list. The guy who kind of developed the strategy behind this was a senior editor at Billboard. He dealt with lists in the past when in his prior career, and I think they did a really good job based on community votes and involvement to really identify who are the good ones in Web3. Because I absolutely agree with you, Jacob. The loudest people generally aren't contributing that much, and they seem to get a lot of followers because they can do hot takes on Twitter. Hot takes don't actually build technology, though, guys. It doesn't move the needle. Yeah. But these people here, highly recommend this list. They are building, they are making the space better, and I think that in 2, 3, 4 years from now, we'll look back at it and be like, the whole industry was made by some of the people listed here.
Yeah, it's tough. Web 2 is. There was a certain level of sophistication. Social media didn't exist in the same way that it does now, et cetera. There's a lot of different things that are different in this kind of build of the new internet, as some people would dub it, which may be a little bit too broad of a stroke. But nonetheless, I think that this is easier to get into and also a little bit more dangerous. And I think it's the same thing with retail investment trading. To be honest, like there are issues in a lot of both of those things, and it can be really, really dangerous for a lot of people. I think education is the one part that is missing from the Web3 industry. And to her credit, although I think most people in crypto hate her, I think Molly White is actually a really important watchdog too. So I do want to shout her out for what she does in the blog that she writes. So, okay. I want to talk about piracy before we get in here, and how you think that what you were just describing, blockchain, can it help piracy, or rather, can it prevent piracy and make the issue better, or is it kind of a net negative, or not even just net anything, just net flat?
Hot take. I don't even know if we should be talking about piracy. It's like there's that time from an engineering perspective could be put into creating a better user experience and user interface for people to engage with the content so that they don't even have to consider piracy as an option. Piracy is a means to an end. It was the easiest way to get the content, or there was people that could have never acquired the content to begin with. So I try not to lose sleep over piracy. It's existed since I first started. I heard about the Napster era. I was only just catching the end of it for music. Now I know technology, it's a lot more probably money that's on the line, and why it's such a more drastic issue. But I still think at the end of the day, if you create an easy way for users to engage with content that they believe is fair, piracy stops becoming as big of a driving force of decision making.
Have you seen a reduction in piracy because of streaming services and music?
Oh, I don't even think I have that number, but let's take it from a gut check perspective. Absolutely. The last time I heard somebody even talk about downloading a song, like that wasn't them clicking save where it downloads to your device. I truly cannot remember the last time I heard about this. Maybe for some like DJs, because they need the live, the tracks to play live. But even then, artists that are getting booked for shows are generally buying their music and using platforms like Beatport to do that. So I don't know. I honestly haven't had a conversation about piracy in like 5 years at this point.
Yeah, I think it still exists in other avenues of entertainment and creative work, but certainly it feels like it is reduced in music. I think you're right. But interesting use case for me of it's something I'm interested in around Web3 in particular, in the way that it could be used. Movies are still highly pirated, even with movie streaming.
People will still find a way to pirate even with blockchain technology. Like there's especially smart contracts. There's always a way to get around them in some capacity or hack them. Like people are smart. You got to keep evolving with the times. I want to say that this is the golden egg magic bullet to any problem that ever exists as blockchain technology, but I just know that that's not the case. If anything, we're creating more problems sometimes with blockchain technology than we're solving. So there's a time and a place where it makes a lot of sense, and the time and a place where we're like, let's throw the word chain at the end of a company, and suddenly like magically it'll solve all the world issues.
Yeah, it's the how much venture capital do you need to raise? Throw blockchain in your deck and let it pour in.
In some ways, yeah, probably.
Yeah. All right. So I want to take the audience questions here in a second, but I have one last one for you from me. And I asked Marcus Bromander from Interslot this as well. You guys have remained independent. And I want to ask you, have you received acquisition offers? And if you've turned them down, why?
Trying to think of like what I should and could say. The answer is yes. And why? It just didn't make sense. It would be a net negative across the board. The only thing that would have changed is like I could get a bigger house. I'm sure there will one day be a partner that makes sense, that we want to be a part of, that makes sense for our artists, for our staff, for myself, for my partner, for everybody. I know that day will come, but it hasn't yet. So entrepreneurs always want to have an exit. Like that's part of the entrepreneurship game, is the exit. So I'm not going to say it's never going to happen, but no, we've the right opportunity, the right person, the right organization just hasn't been there. So
we have two questions from my staff, and we had one requested speaker, but I think they had not messaged, and we just want to make sure that we're vetting questions. So if you do want to submit one while we're doing this, use hashtag Visionaries Podcast, and my staff will reach out to you and make sure you're not being disrespectful to Mike or to the show. So that's important. Thank you.
Is it our boy Lenville Laird? Lenville Laird is always allowed on stage.
Okay.
Yeah, like he's getting this. Lenville Laird's getting the stamp of approval.
All right. Cool.
So I'll be down, Lenville.
I'll ask these first couple questions and then we'll go there.
Okay.
All right. So the first one comes from a friend of one of my staffs who is not a Twitter user. And this is back to the discussion we were just having. Do you think that there's a sustainable system for music distribution with NFTs that allows musicians to both control their music's use and earn more than on modern platforms? So it's an earning question, which we didn't really cover.
Any artist I speak to, I tell them it's not an and or sorry, it's not an or, it's an and conversation. You should still think about how to develop your brand and work with record labels and work with marketers on Web2 and on DSPs. Everything we've learned, continue doing that. Look to Web3 to be a way to either identify super fans, to reward super fans, to create unique content for those fans, to create unique experiences for those fans that a lot of the times have costs to it. And that NFTs allow you to create a revenue stream and also cover some of the costs to create those experiences. So no, it's to me, sorry, it's entirely an and discussion. Web 2 and Web 3 are not, like, I actually don't like the branding. The branding of Web 2, Web 3 sucks because it sounds like Web 3 is something better than Web 2. It's not. It's it's just a different way to look at things, and they can both coexist at the same time. So we probably should rethink how the branding of NFTs and the branding of Web3 sucks. I'm going to put it out there. I'm not in charge of branding for the whole ecosystem, though. Hopefully that covered the question.
Yeah, for sure. The other question from Sammy on my staff is, has Monstercat ever considered expanding the catalog with other genres?
Oh, yeah. We've definitely had the discussions. I think, we ended up deciding that dance music is our home, and we will probably always be, at least in some form, electronic. But we've definitely had the conversations. I think that the area I've started to think about is almost from a mentorship or how do I help the next generation of labels, or even the generation of labels that currently exist that are struggling. How do I help them, or how do I work with them? Which would then, in my way, I guess, be able to be multi-genre or work with other genres. Because I would love to have done some work in hip hop or rock or techno or jazz. I would love to have had some exposure to that. I just never had the chance.
Do you think that staying in that lane was part of the reason that you all were so successful? Is that the audience the consistency of the content? They may not be. There may be some people that aren't DMB fans, or there may be people that aren't electro fans, but you staying sort of in dance music helped your growth? I'm
sure in some ways. Is there any YouTube channel or Twitch streamer you could think of that can go and, occasionally. Sometimes people are that good that they can do their cooking stream, and then they can do their Call of Duty content, or they can play Minecraft out. Some people can do that. We found that even what I just described, though, how do I answer this? We were multi-genre within electronic music. So Correct. There was still a place that you knew what you were kind of getting, but there was still flexibility in the content. The other form of that would have been, we're all electronic music and we only do dubstep. I think we would have struggled if that was the case. We only did one single genre. So we've been open-minded to an extent. As I said, I can't work on those other fields really with Monstercat, but maybe we'll find a way one day.
Okay. Well, if Linville Laird would like to answer or request speaker again, I will promote.
Linville's allowed.
Mike's stamp of approval. Linville, if you're still listening, I see you in the space. Happy to have you ask your question. Let's see.
Linville's an OG fan. Yeah, he's been with us through thick and thin.
That's awesome. Maybe
he's gone AFK on us. That's okay. Cool.
Okay. Well, sad, but that's okay.
This is his one shot. His one opportunity.
Sounds like he's a frequenting your other spaces, though.
Yeah. He's a good dude.
Oh, now there's the request. All right, let's do it. Linville, It's gonna be all you.
Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I tried. It was strange. I pressed respond, but it's like I'm usually used to let people invite me into a Twitter space. But hey, we're connected. You're able to hear me. Thank you so much. First off, let me just say this again to Mike Darlington. Thank you so much, and for everyone else in the Monstercat team for creating this incredible label and introducing someone like me to the world that is electronic dance music, and not just like one specific genre, but all different kinds of genres. We're talking like the old days of trance and house to like now electro house, and like so many other genres in between. So first off, let me say I thank you so much for everything that you've done, and the least I can do is say thank you at the very least.
Well, thank you, Lenville. Do you have a question for us while you've got us?
Yeah, I was just going to ask. Someone kind of stole my question at first when I was
Oh
looking through the
no.
questions, but so I had to kind of think of another one off the fly. But I'll just ask this. I was reading through some of the interviews that Darlington has done for Billboard, for Forbes, and others as well. But I'm curious to ask, do you see Muscat now as like kind of like a major label for any smaller artists to join in, or do you still believe in like what you said before, which is that if we're able to bring some brand new talent in from a major label, that makes me happy? I'm just curious to like hear more elaboration on that.
Okay.
Good question.
So, we work with art. Well, first we got to start with the definition of what major label means, because to some people, major label only means, Sony, Warner, Universal. Like that's the definition of their mind of what a major label is. Some people look at a major as somebody who is like industry leading or genre leading, and that makes a difference. For Monstercat, the way we look at it, we want to have artists that we can develop at any given time, and those are generally artists that are on the come up. We also want to make sure we work with credible industry leading artists, because I think that they bring opportunity to the ecosystem, the brand, and to the developing rosters as well. Developing those relationships gives us artists we can work with on the live side. We can pair up on collaborations, offer some of our developing artists tour support. So it's interesting because sometimes in the Monstercat community, I see people complain. They're like, they stop signing little guys. They're only working with big artists. And the answer to that is that it's sometimes we go through periods where it might seem like there's not a lot of developing artists that are new, but that might be because we had signed them like in the years prior, and we're now like really focusing behind the scenes on how we're actually going to aid them in their growth. So, Lenville, to answer your question, we will always continue signing the next generation of talent. We will always commit to developing the next generation, and yet you will still see some of the largest artists in dance music work with Monstercat, and for us to work with them in some regard, because it only helps the developing artists at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I think it definitely now with the growth of some of your original OGs too. That's what I was getting at earlier about how kind of they pay it back. So good answer. Thank you, Darlington.
Especially Muzz. Muzz is crushing it. Like he brought him up earlier. He's doing so well.
I am so happy to see that man's success. Good person. Really good person. Cool. All right. Well, in that case, we will close out the show. If you all have not listened to Visionaries before and this is your first time here in the space, we have done several different episodes prior to this, including with Stone Mountain 64 and Snoopy, the co-founders of Pipeline last week. We've also had Adriak and Maya Higa, who were really interesting conversations. And Marcus Bromander, who is the co-founder of Innersloth and co-creator of Among Us, which was a good discussion. Doesn't do a lot of interviews. So you can find all of those on our YouTube, or you can find them on the Visionaries podcast on all the different platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. We will be back Wednesday. We'll be announcing our guests in the next couple days. So stay tuned to the @Overcome Twitter, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Jacob.